Manhattan plunged into darkness at 10 p.m., when the city's power grid collapsed like a sandcastle before a wave. Streetlights went out, skyscrapers turned into massive black shadows, and ambulance sirens merged with panicked screams in the streets. James Whitmore, 38 years old, founder of Whitmore Tech with a net worth of $4 billion, stepped out from his office on the 52nd floor of a midtown tower. His charcoal Armani suit hugged his tall frame, but his eyes were cold, like the world was nothing more than a spreadsheet waiting to be optimized. He had planned to return to his penthouse on the Upper East Side tonight, but the blackout had jammed every road. His driver, stuck somewhere in the chaos, texted to apologize. James, unaccustomed to waiting, decided to walk. That was his first mistake. Barely 10 minutes later, two shadows lunged at him from the darkness as he crossed an alley near Times Square. One snatched the Hermes leather briefcase that held his laptop and multi-million-dollar contracts. The other shoved him into a pile of broken garbage. James tried to fight back, but a sharp piece of glass on the ground sliced deep into the palm of his left hand. Blood streamed out, soaking through his white shirt sleeve. The thieves disappeared into the darkness, leaving James crumpled on the sidewalk, feeling entirely out of control for the first time. He, who had negotiated with Silicon Valley CEOs and earned the reverence of Wall Street, was now just a bleeding man in the heart of a collapsing city. James staggered to his feet, clutching his wound, and dragged himself toward the faint glow of St. Luke's Hospital, just a few blocks away. Now powered by a generator, the hospital's automatic doors opened with a weak hiss. Inside was chaos. Amber emergency lights cast surreal hues across the white walls, turning everything into something out of a dream. Nurses rushed past, and patients sat sprawled on chairs, some groaning, others screaming for help. Phones rang non-stop, blending with the tense voices of the medical staff. James, in a torn suit and pale face, looked no different from a homeless man who had been beaten. He leaned against the wall near the reception desk, trying to appear composed. But the pain and humiliation pounded his heart. He wasn't used to needing anyone. Since leaving the orphanage at 18 with $200 and a bus ticket, James had built his life on self-reliance. He didn't believe in kindness because everything had a price in his world. But now, with blood seeping between his fingers, he knew he needed help. "Sir, are you okay?" A gentle voice, with the soft lilt of Louisiana, cut through his thoughts. James looked up and, in the dim light, met the warm brown eyes of a young woman. She was no older than 29, with skin the color of polished ebony and neatly tied curly hair revealing the graceful lines of her neck. She wore a worn nurse's uniform and frayed sneakers, but how she stood, calm and assured, took James by surprise. He was used to seeing people through a lens of utility, but this woman seemed utterly free of calculation. "I'm fine," James replied instinctively, his voice dry. The lie he had told for 20 years to mask his vulnerability. But the woman looked down at his bloody hand, then back into his eyes, as if she could see the invisible scars beneath the surface. "No, you're not," she said gently but firmly. She stepped closer, and James caught a faint scent. Lavender mixed with something warm that reminded him of his childhood and the rare foster mother who once held him. "I'm Amara," she continued, reaching for his injured hand without hesitation. "Let me help you." The moment her fingers touched his skin, James felt a current run through him. Her hands were warm, gentle, yet steady, like she was used to treating wounds of both body and spirit. She led him down the hospital corridor, where dim red emergency lights flickered. Despite his dizziness, James noticed how she moved, unhurried, unlike the other nurses. She was steady, like a lighthouse in a storm. Amara brought him into a small supply room, where a battery-powered flashlight illuminated shelves stacked with gauze and antiseptics. She pointed to a stool. "Sit down. This might sting a little. James obeyed, letting someone else take charge for the first time in years. As she knelt beside him, cleaning the blood with a fresh cloth, he watched her closely. Under the golden light, her face showed fatigue and fierce determination. Her uniform hung loosely, like she'd lost weight, and her shoes were nearly flat. But she worked with unwavering focus, as if his bloodied hand was the only thing that mattered in the world. "What happened to you?" Amara asked, her voice curious but not judgmental. She used tweezers to extract a tiny shard of glass, making James wince. "I was attacked," he replied hesitantly. "The power went out while I was walking. 2 guys jumped me, stole my bag, and pushed me down." He didn't share the whole truth. That he had left the office at midnight because he couldn't bear the emptiness of his penthouse, and had walked to prove he didn't need anyone. But Amara didn't press him. She just nodded, continuing to dress his wound with the care of someone crafting a piece of art. "You're lucky," she said, as she tied off the bandage. "The cut's deep, but no stitches are needed. Keep it clean, and you'll be fine." She looked up, and their eyes met. At that moment, James felt like she wasn't just looking at him, but through him, beyond the expensive suit, the reputation, and the fortress he had built since being abandoned as a boy. "Why are you helping me?" he asked, voice hoarse. "You don't even know who I am." Amara smiled. A small but radiant smile lit up the cramped room. "Because you need help, and everyone deserves kindness, no matter who they are." She stood, tidying up her tools. "All done. You should see a real doctor when things calm down." James rose, the pressure in his bandaged hand pulsing with each heartbeat. He wanted to say something. "Thank you. I'm sorry." Even ask her name again. But the words caught in his throat. Amara opened the door, hallway light spilling in behind her, and turned to glance at him. "Be careful out there. This city isn't easy in the dark." "You too," James replied, his voice unexpectedly soft. He stepped into the corridor, feeling like he had just left another world. When he turned back, Amara had vanished into the chaotic crowd of the hospital, leaving behind the faint scent of lavender and a strange sensation in his chest, as if a door had cracked open, ever so slightly, in a heart-long shut. James walked outside into a New York still swallowed by darkness. The bleeding had stopped, but his hand continued to tremble. Not from pain, but from something he couldn't yet name. James Whitmore felt he was not alone for the first time in years. And somehow, faint as it was, he knew he had to find the woman named Amara again. Manhattan was slowly returning to its usual rhythm 3 days after the blackout. Skyscrapers glowed again. Traffic resumed its steady flow, and news channels shifted from grid failure updates to market analysis. But in James Whitmore's mind, everything remained frozen when he met Amara Johnson in the supply room of St. Luke's Hospital. Though less painful, his bandaged hand was a constant reminder of her warm brown eyes and gentle voice. He had tried to return to work, signing contracts, meeting investors, and ignoring 47 emails from his assistant. But every time he looked down at the bandage, he saw Amara's face, like a melody he couldn't forget. James sat in his 52nd floor office, staring out the window at the stream of traffic below. He had looked up the 8th Street Community Center, where Amara said she volunteered on Wednesdays and Saturdays. Today was Saturday, and the Patek Philippe on his wrist read 11 o'clock a.m. He had a lunch meeting with the CFO of a major bank, but for the first time in his career, he didn't want to go. He wanted to see Amara, not to repay her, though that was the excuse he told himself, but to understand why she made him feel more alive than any billion-dollar deal ever had. The decision was made in an instant. James canceled the lunch, causing his assistant Rebecca to nearly drop her iPad in shock. He swapped his Brioni suit for a deep navy cashmere sweater and black jeans, his most casual outfit. No driver or Bentley was waiting when he stepped out of the building. He called an Uber and typed in the address of the community center. In the car, he glanced at his bandaged hand, wondering what he was doing. He was James Whitmore, CEO of Whitmore Tech, not some fool chasing a stranger over a single act of kindness. But he knew he couldn't turn back when the car pulled up in front of a red brick building on 8th Street. The 8th Street Community Center looked like an oasis in a noisy neighborhood. Its exterior walls were covered in colorful graffiti, and the faded wooden sign that read, "Everyone welcome," had weathered many seasons. James pushed the door open and was immediately hit by a mixture of smells: disinfectant, tomato soup, and something warm, perhaps freshly baked bread. The main hall was packed. Children running around, adults chatting on plastic chairs, and a group of volunteers in t-shirts bearing the center's logo, handing out donated clothes. In his expensive sweater and Italian leather shoes, James felt like a fish out of water. "Can I help you with something?" An older woman with silver hair wrapped in a scarf looked at him from the reception desk. Her voice was sharp, as if she was used to dealing with curious outsiders who didn't belong. "I'm looking for Amara Johnson," James said, trying to keep his tone calm. "I wanted to thank her for helping me a few days ago." The woman narrowed her eyes as if deciding whether or not he could be trusted. "Amara's in the kitchen, straight down the hall, at the end. But she's busy, so don't keep her long." James nodded, feeling like he had just passed a test. The hallway to the kitchen was lined with bulletin boards crowded with notices: free health check schedules, job training classes, and children's artwork. The laughter, conversation, and metal spoons clanging against pots grew louder. James stopped at the kitchen door, and his heart pounded when he saw Amara. She stood by a large pot of soup, wearing a gray t-shirt and worn jeans, her curly hair tied high. She was ladling soup into a bowl for an older man, smiling as he told a long-winded story. Afternoon sunlight streamed through the window, casting a golden glow on her dark skin, making her seem radiant. James took a deep breath and stepped in. "Amara?" She looked up, her brown eyes widening in surprise for a moment. Then she smiled, the warm smile that had haunted him for 3 days. "James," she said, setting down the ladle, "what are you doing here?" He said, "I wanted to thank you but hesitated to say anything about that night. You helped me more than you know." He raised his bandaged hand as if it were proof. Amara wiped her hands on her apron and stepped closer. "You didn't have to come here to say thank you." "How's your hand?" "Much better, thanks to you." James glanced around the kitchen, where 3 other volunteers were slicing bread and washing dishes. "I also want to help if you need an extra hand." Amara tilted her head as if assessing him. "Have you ever worked in a kitchen before? Or served food?" "No," James admitted, feeling a little sheepish. "But I'm a quick learner." She laughed, the sound soft and airy like wind chimes. "All right, but don't spill the soup. We don't have enough ingredients to make another pot." She handed him a green apron, and when their fingers touched, James felt warmth spread through him. He tied the apron, trying to hide his awkwardness, while Amara showed him how to ladle soup evenly. The kitchen quickly became a challenge. James, more accustomed to running board meetings than ladling soup, spilled some onto the counter, prompting a volunteer named Marcus, a big guy with tattoos on his arms, to joke, "Hey, buddy, the soup goes in the bowl, not the floor." Everyone laughed, and James, instead of getting irritated as usual, found himself smiling back. Amara stood nearby, patiently guiding him, her eyes sparkling, as if secretly enjoying his clumsiness. "Not too full," she said, placing her hand gently over his to adjust the ladle. The touch was light, but James's heart raced. "We have to make sure there's enough for everyone." She looked up, and for a moment the world seemed to narrow to just the two. James wanted to say something, but a child ran in, asking for more bread, breaking the moment. As the line of guests grew, James began to find his rhythm. He ladled soup, handed out bowls, and even chatted with the people coming in. A single mother talking about her job hunt, an older man bragging about his dog. Each story reminded him this wasn't just a meal. It was a community, a place where people were seen as human beings, not data points. Amara moved among them effortlessly, chatting, encouraging, and occasionally touching someone's shoulder to comfort them. James watched her, wondering how someone working 3 shifts a day, as she'd once said, could still give so much. When the meal was over, James stayed to help clean, wiping tables next to Amara. He realized he was enjoying the moment. No emails, no phone calls, just the sound of running water and Amara softly humming an old R&B tune. "She said you did great folding a dish towel for the first time." "I had a good teacher," James replied, looking at her. "Do you do this often?" "I'm not on the night shift at the cleaning office on Wednesdays and Saturdays." Amara shrugged as if it was nothing special. "These people deserve kindness. A lot of folks think they're invisible. But I don't." James said nothing, feeling like she had touched a deep part of him. He had once been invisible too, during those orphanage years when no one cared if he was hungry or cold. Now, he was a billionaire, and the world saw him as a symbol, not a man. But Amara was different. She looked at him, and that both scared and thrilled him. "Do you have time for dinner?" he blurted out as they stepped out of the kitchen. "So I can thank you properly." "Just a meal, nothing fancy." Amara stopped, her eyes searching his. "Dinner? With me?" She smiled, but there was hesitation. "You don't have to do that, James. I helped you because it was the right thing to do." "I know," he said sincerely, "but I want to." "Monday? I know a small Italian place in Greenwich Village. Not too fancy, I promise." She tilted her head, considering. Then she nodded. "All right, Monday, 7 o'clock?" "7 it is," James confirmed, feeling as if he'd just closed the most important deal of his life. As Amara returned to help another volunteer, James left the center and entered the bustling street. He didn't call an Uber right away. Instead, he stood still, watching through the window as Amara laughed with a child. For the first time in years, James Whitmore felt a flicker of hope, not for his company or public image, but for his heart, which had been frozen for far too long. The 8th Street Community Center kitchen gradually quieted as the lunch service ended. The last of the bowls were stacked on shelves, and the scent of tomato soup still lingered in the air, mixing with children's laughter drifting in from the playground outside. Still wearing his stained green apron, James Whitmore wiped down the counter beside Amara Johnson. He worked with an unexpected focus, as if this task mattered just as much as a board meeting at Whitmore Tech. But inside, he was simply trying to prolong the moment to stay close to her a little longer. Amara hummed an old R&B tune, her voice soft, but full of emotion, as if she were telling a story without words. She rinsed a pot, sleeves rolled up to reveal slender arms, her dark skin gleaming under the afternoon sun filtering through the window. James glanced at her, wondering how someone who worked 3 jobs a day, as she'd mentioned, could still radiate so much vitality. He wanted to ask, to know more about her, but he didn't know where to begin. In his world, conversations always had a purpose: negotiation, persuasion, or gauging the opposition. But with Amara, None of those rules seemed to apply. "You did better than I expected," Amara said, breaking the silence. She set the pot on the drying rack and turned to him with a playful smile. "I thought you'd quit after spilling the soup the second time." James laughed, a sound unfamiliar even to himself. "I'm not one to give up easily, and I had a strict teacher." "Strict?" Amara feigned a frown, hand on her hip. "I was being gentle with you." She nodded toward his bandaged hand. "Hey, is your hand okay? Working here isn't exactly light duty." James looked down at his hand. The bandage was still clean, though slightly worn. "It's fine. It reminds me of that night, and of you." He said it without thinking, and immediately felt his face grow hot. He, who could speak before thousands of shareholders without flinching, was now flustered in front of a volunteer in a kitchen. Amara tilted her head, her gaze inquisitive but not judgmental. "You say things that catch people off guard," she said gently. "Come on, let's take a break out back. We deserve to breathe after 2 hours straight." She led him through the kitchen's back door into a small brick-paved yard where a few old plastic chairs and a rickety table stood. A tall oak-cast shade, its leaves rustling in the breeze. The sound of children playing basketball a few yards away blended with distant traffic. Amara sat down, stretched her legs, and sipped from a plastic water bottle. James sat across from her, feeling like a student waiting to be called on. He wasn't used to this kind of peace. No phones, no schedule, just fresh air and a woman who made him want to shed his armor. "You don't come to places like this often, do you?" Amara asked, her eyes steady as if she could read his thoughts. James shrugged, trying to seem relaxed. "Not exactly. I grew up in places similar, but it's been a while." He paused, unsure whether to go on. His past was something he had buried beneath designer suits and prestige. But Amara's eyes, warm and sincere, made him want to try. "I grew up in an orphanage," he said, voice quieting. "He was abandoned at 6. I don't know who my parents were. I bounced from one foster home to another. No one kept me longer than a year. I left with $200 and a bus ticket when I turned 18. Since then, I have built everything myself." Amara stayed silent, not with awkwardness or pity, but with a quiet acknowledgement, as if honoring every word. "That must have taken a lot of strength," she said after a moment, "to go from nothing to whatever it is you've built." James gave a dry laugh devoid of joy. "Strength, or just stubbornness. I stopped trusting anyone because no one ever stayed." He looked down at his hand, fingers brushing the bandage. "Until that night, when you helped me, I didn't understand why." Amara took another sip of water, her gaze distant. She said quietly, "I know what it's like to be left behind. My mom died when I was 15. Cancer. No insurance. No money. Bills piling up. I had to drop out of school for a year to work. Washing dishes, cleaning houses, anything to pay the medical debt. After that, I tried to go back and get my teaching certificate, but I couldn't afford to keep it. Now, I work in office cleaning and cafe service and volunteer here." James looked at her, feeling as if he'd just been punched in the chest. He had read the financial reports of Fortune 500 companies, but Amara's story made him realize how little he knew about real lives. "You don't give up, do you?" he asked, a voice full of admiration. Amara gave a faint smile. "Giving up isn't an option when no one's there to catch you. But I'm not telling you this for pity. I'm telling you because you were honest with me." She looked him in the eye, her expression sincere. "I helped you that night because I know what it feels like to be hurt and have no one care. I didn't want you to feel that way." Her words swept through the walls James had spent 20 years building. He wanted to speak, but his throat tightened. Instead, he nodded, feeling like something inside him had been released. They sat silently, listening to the rustling leaves and children's laughter. James realized this was the first time he had felt safe sharing a part of his true self, not as a billionaire, not as a CEO, just as James. You know, Amara said, breaking the silence, places like this, they've taught me that everyone has a story. The older man you served soup to today? He was a mechanic, raised 3 kids, then lost his job. The young woman with the baby? She's studying to become a nurse. They're not statistics, they're people. James nodded, but inside, a question burned. What does she see in me? A story? Or just a lost rich man? He wanted to ask, but lacked the courage. Instead, he said, "You make me want to know those stories." Amara smiled, but there was a trace of caution. Careful, James. These stories might change you. She stood and brushed off her jeans. Come on, I need to lock up the kitchen before the kids tear this place down. James stood, following her back inside. Amara turned to him when they locked up and parted in the lobby. Monday, 7 o'clock? Please don't keep me waiting. I wouldn't dare, James replied, a rare smile tugging at his lips. He left the center and stepped into the noisy street, but this time he felt lighter. On the Uber ride home, he looked out the window, thinking of Amara and her story. He had built an empire, but never felt like he belonged anywhere. With Amara, he was beginning to sense a possibility. Not quite love, not yet, but perhaps a place where he could just be himself. But deep down, one question lingered. Could someone like him, from a world so different, enter her life without hurting her? Monday, 7 p.m. James Whitmore stood outside a small Italian restaurant called Trattoria Bella in Greenwich Village, his healed palm instinctively clenched. He wore a navy blue sweater and black jeans instead of a suit, an intentional choice to make Amara Johnson feel more at ease, but he still felt like an outsider. With its red brick exterior and windows draped with checkered curtains, the restaurant was a place he'd stumbled upon 3 years ago while walking off the stress of a failed deal. The scent of garlic bread and the laughter from inside had always brought him comfort, even though he rarely returned. But tonight, he hoped this place could bridge his world, the billionaire founder of Whitmore Tech, and hers, a volunteer juggling 3 jobs to get by. James checked his Patek Philippe watch. 5 minutes to go. He'd reserved a corner table near the window, where the candlelight was intimate without being extravagant. Still, he was nervous. Would Amara come? Would she see him as another rich man with a passing curiosity, as she once teased at the community center? He shook the thought away when he saw her appear at the end of the block, walking with that quiet confidence that always made his heart beat faster. Amara wore a simple navy dress that hugged her slender frame, paired with slightly worn but polished black flats. Her curly hair fell loose around her shoulders, and the streetlight gave her dark skin a glowing radiance. She paused before the restaurant, checking her reflection in the glass. A flicker of unease passed over her face, and James wondered what she was thinking. "Amara!" he called, stepping forward. She looked up and smiled, and all his anxiety melted away. "You look incredible," he said. "Thank you," she replied, a bit shy. "You're not so bad yourself." She gestured to his sweater. "No suit?" "I'm surprised." James said, "I'm trying to blend in," as he led her inside. The air was rich with the scent of oregano and red wine, mingling with the soft clink of cutlery and warm conversations. The owner, a middle-aged Italian man named Giovanni, greeted them with a wide smile. He said the best table for two, guiding them to the window-side table where a small candle flickered. James pulled out Amara's chair, a natural gesture, but it made her pause for a beat before sitting down. They received their menus, and James noticed her reading them with unusual focus, her eyes lingering on the prices before the dishes. He pretended to look at his menu, but his thoughts were only on making her feel comfortable. "What's good here?" Amara asked, trying to sound casual. "I don't eat out much. You pick." James suggested that the pasta marinara be great, or the mushroom ravioli if you want something richer. "What would you like to drink?" "They have an excellent Chianti." Amara hesitated, her fingers tapping lightly on the table. "Just water, thanks. I don't drink much." James heard the tension in her voice. A bottle of Chianti here could cost half her weekly income, and she had once told him she worked 3 jobs to make ends meet. "2 glasses of water," he told Giovanni, who had come to take their order, "and a plate of bruschetta to start. Sound good?" He looked at Amara, and she gave a slight nod, her gaze softening. As Giovanni walked away, Amara glanced around, her fingers playing with the edge of the tablecloth. "This place is lovely. How'd you find it?" "By accident," James said. 3 years ago, I went for a walk after a rough day at work. The smell of garlic bread pulled me in, and I stayed the whole night, listening to an older man tell stories about fishing in Naples. I've liked it ever since." Amara smiled, her shoulders relaxing. "It doesn't sound like you. You only ate at places with month-long reservation lists." James shrugged with a self-deprecating smile. "Sometimes, I need to remember what the real world feels like. Not everything is boardrooms and deals." He paused, realizing he'd revealed a piece of himself. "What about you? Do you have a favorite place?" Amara thought for a moment, her gaze distant. "There's a little cafe in Harlem, near where I live. Nothing fancy. Old wooden tables, chairs that creak. But they let me sit all day with a $2 coffee, reading or grading papers when I used to teach. It felt like home." "Teaching?" James asked, intrigued. "You were a teacher?" Amara nodded, though her eyes briefly dimmed. "Elementary, 3rd grade. I loved those kids. They were curious, honest, and believed anything was possible. But I couldn't keep my certification. Renewal fees were too high, and I couldn't afford to quit work to intern again. Now, I dream about going back someday." James fell silent, feeling like he'd touched something tender. He wanted to ask for more help, but knew this wasn't the moment. "You'll go back," he said with conviction. "I've seen how you treat people at the center. You were born to teach." Amara looked at him, her gaze softening. "Thank you. What about you? What's your dream? Or, have you already got everything?" The question stopped James. He had a penthouse, a private jet, and a $4 billion tech empire. But a dream? "I used to dream of never going hungry again," he said quietly. "Growing up in an orphanage, I thought money would fix everything. Now I have cash, but sometimes I still feel empty." Amara tilted her head, her expression kind, not judgmental. "Money can't buy the feeling of belonging," she said. "My mother used to say, 'You can be poor, but don't be poor in kindness.'" Her words felt like a gentle blade to James's chest. He wanted to tell her she was right, that he'd spent 20 years without belonging anywhere. But Giovanni returned with their bruschetta and waters, breaking the moment. They began eating, the conversation lightening. Books. Amara loved Toni Morrison. James read John Grisham to unwind. New York. She loved fall. He preferred winter. But beneath it all, James felt a current flowing between them, growing stronger with every glance and every shared laugh. When the main course arrived, pasta marinara for both, Amara accidentally brushed his hand while passing the bread. "Sorry," she said, but didn't pull back immediately. James held her hand, his fingers grazing the back of hers. "It's okay," he said, his voice husky. They looked at each other, and her brown eyes shimmered in the candlelight like they held an untold story. The meal ended, and James paid the bill before Amara could see the total. They stepped outside, wrapped in the crisp October night air. James suggested a walk through Washington Square Park, and Amara agreed. Under the streetlights, they walked close, shoulders brushing. When they reached the fountain, James stopped and turned to her. "Amara, I'm happy you came tonight." "So am I," she said softly. "But James, I'm not used to this. Restaurants, people like you. I'm afraid I don't belong." James stepped closer, his heart pounding. "You belong wherever you want to, and I want you here, with me." He gently lifted her chin, his gaze locked onto hers. Then, drawn by something neither of them could name, he leaned in, and their lips met. The kiss was tender, but full of feelings, as if they were saying everything they hadn't dared speak aloud. When they pulled apart, Amara was breathless, her hand gripping his sweater. "James," she whispered, "what are we doing?" "I don't know," he replied, his forehead resting against hers. "But I don't want it to stop." They stood there, bathed in the golden light of the park, unaware that a passerby had just snapped a photo of them, a photo that would change everything. But for now, there were only the two of them, and the fragile hope that this feeling might be strong enough to bridge the gap between the two worlds. A sudden storm swept over Manhattan on Friday night, turning streets into rivers and shaking the sky with thunder. James Whitmore stood inside his 42nd-floor penthouse on the Upper East Side, watching as rain pelted the windows like tiny bullets. He had just called Amara Johnson, hoping to meet her at the 8th Street Community Center to serve dinner, but the weather ruined their plans. "It's like the end of the world out there," he said into the phone, his voice laced with concern. "Do you want to come over instead? I'll cook something. Nothing fancy. Just us." On the other end, Amara hesitated. James could picture her standing in her small Harlem apartment, biting her lip as she did when deep in thought. "You cook?" she asked, teasing. "I'm not buying it. I'm full of surprises," James replied, a smile audible in his voice. "I'll send a car. 7 okay?" After a long pause, she agreed, and James felt his heart lighten. He wasn't sure what he was doing, but ever since that kiss in Washington Square Park, he only wanted to be near her. When Amara stepped out of the private elevator into the penthouse, James was in the kitchen, stirring a pot of puttanesca sauce with a wooden spoon. She wore a jade green sweater and jeans, her rain-damp curls clinging to her cheeks, her dark skin glowing beneath the warm lights. She looked around, her brown eyes wide as they took in the expansive space. Walnut floors, floor-to-ceiling windows framing a glittering Manhattan skyline, and bookshelves packed with weathered hardcovers. "This place," she said softly. "It's like something out of a movie." James set down the spoon and stepped over, gently brushing a drop of rain from her cheek. "He said it looks better with you in it," his voice low. Amara smiled, but there was a flicker of unease in her eyes, as if comparing this luxury to her cramped room back home. "Smells fantastic," she said, shifting the topic. "You cooked? Or is there a hidden chef somewhere?" James led her into the kitchen, now covered in flour and cluttered with a worn pasta maker. "No chef, just me and an old recipe from an Italian friend." He pointed to the sauce. "Puttanesca. It's the only dish I trust myself with. Want to help?" Amara rolled her sleeves and stood beside him, pressing fresh pasta dough. They worked in an easy rhythm, brushing hands now and then, each touch quickening James's pulse. She told him about a student who once drew her as a superhero. He shared about sleeping in his car during his startup days. Their laughter blended with the storm outside, creating their world. Amara suddenly grew quiet when they finally sat down at the ebony wood dining table, the candlelight flickering between them. James noticed her staring at her plate, fingers playing with the napkin. "Is something wrong?" he asked, setting down his fork. Amara took a breath, her eyes locking with his. "James, I have to be honest. I looked you up after our dinner at Trattoria Bella. I know who you are. Whitmore Tech, the $4 billion, this penthouse. I didn't plan to. I feared this was a dream and needed to know the truth." James froze as if the floor had shifted beneath him. He'd feared this moment, but hadn't expected it so soon. "And what did you think?" he asked cautiously. "That I'm some billionaire playing romance?" Amara shook her head, emotion rising in her eyes. "No, I think you're genuine. But I don't belong here, James. You have everything: money, power, people who want a piece of you. I have 3 jobs, a crumbling apartment, and dreams that never came true." James stood, walked around the table, and knelt beside her. He took her hand, feeling the faint tremble. "Amara, you're the most real person I've ever met. You see me. Not the money or fame, just me. I don't need that world if I don't have you." She looked at him, her eyes brimming with tears. "James, you don't understand. I'm afraid I'll disappoint you. I'm so scared your world will swallow me whole." James lifted her chin, his gaze steady. "My world was empty before you. You think I have it all, but I had no one to share it with until you." He leaned in and kissed her, deeper this time, filled with yearning. Amara kissed him back, clutching his shirt like she feared letting go. The kiss led them to the sofa, where they fell into each other as rain roared against the windows. James kissed her neck and felt her heartbeat quicken beneath his lips. "Amara," he whispered, "if you want to stop, say so." She pulled him closer, her eyes fierce with longing. "I don't want to stop. I want you." They made love with a tenderness and passion that felt like discovering one another for the first time. In his arms, Amara felt cherished. In hers, James found a safety he had never known. Afterward, they lay wrapped in a wool blanket on the couch, listening to the rain taper off. Amara rested her head on his chest, her fingers tracing circles on his arm. "James," she said softly, "I think I love you. And that scares me." James kissed her forehead, his heart tightening. "I love you too, Amara. And I'm afraid of losing you." He held her tighter, unaware that a photo of their kiss in the park had already gone viral, about to erupt into a media storm. But for now, in that penthouse, there was only the two of them, and fragile love, new and fierce, burning quietly in the night. On Saturday morning, weak sunlight filtered through the window of Amara Johnson's small Harlem apartment, casting a glow on the navy dress she had worn the night before, now hanging over a chair. She sat on the bed as her phone buzzed non-stop with social media notifications. A wave of dread rose in her chest as she opened Twitter, and her heart nearly stopped. A photo of her and James Whitmore kissing by the Washington Square Park fountain spread like wildfire. Beneath it were hundreds of comments. "Manhattan's newest gold digger? Is billionaire Whitmore playing charity games? This girl's hit the jackpot." Amara scrolled down, each word cutting like a knife. She tossed the phone onto the bed, her hands trembling. She knew she shouldn't care. These people didn't know her. They didn't know she worked 3 jobs a day, hadn't eaten to pay her mother's medical debts, or had bandaged James's wound at St. Luke's out of kindness. But the cruel words echoed in her mind, amplifying her fear that she didn't belong with him. James, who owned Whitmore Tech, a $4 billion empire, who lived in a penthouse overlooking all of Manhattan, and her, a volunteer, a cleaner, living in an apartment where the faucet constantly leaked. How could she ever belong in his world? Meanwhile, on the 52nd floor of Whitmore Tech headquarters, James sat in his office, staring at the same photo on his computer screen. His assistant Rebecca stood beside him, her expression tense. "This photo hit a gossip blog at 3 a.m., she said flatly. "Now it's everywhere. Twitter, Instagram, and even CNN mention it. Investors have been calling all morning, James. They're worried this scandal might affect the IPO next week." James rubbed his temples, trying to stay calm. He'd anticipated this might happen, just not this fast. "What are they saying?" he asked, though he already knew. Rebecca scrolled through her iPad. Gregory Kennedy from Meridian Capital called it an unprofessional entanglement. Victoria Blair from Paramount Investments thinks you're trying to generate buzz to boost stock prices, but it could backfire. They want you to release a statement, deny it, or do something. "Do something?" James growled. "Like, abandon her?" Rebecca shrugged slightly, her expression softening. "I'm not saying that, but you need to understand. She's being labeled a gold digger. Some outlets are already digging into her background. 29 years old, janitorial staff, volunteers on 8th Street, and lives in subsidized housing. They're turning her into a rags-to-riches narrative." James slammed his fist on the desk, making the coffee cup rattle. "She's not their story. She's—" He stopped short of saying love, not in front of Rebecca, but the truth inside him had never been more evident. "I won't let them hurt her." His phone buzzed, but it wasn't Amara. A message from an unknown number. "Does Miss Johnson have any comment on her relationship with James Whitmore?" He shut the phone off, feeling like the walls he had built around his heart were under siege. In Harlem, Amara was working the morning shift at a midtown law office, trying to focus on mopping the floor. But her coworker, Tanya, a black woman with neatly braided hair, had already seen the news. "Amara, are you a celebrity now?" Tanya teased, holding up her phone. "Kissing a billionaire in the park? Girl, I need lessons." Amara forced a smile, her voice shaky. "It's not like that, Tanya. It was just a moment." She bent down, scrubbing harder, as if she could scrub away the comments. "A moment the whole world saw?" Tanya said, her tone softening. "Hey, don't let that crap get to you. I saw how he looked at you in that photo. He's into you, big time." Amara shook her head, her eyes stinging. "But what if the whole world thinks I'm using him? What if he starts thinking that too?" Tanya touched her shoulder, but Amara felt heavier with every passing second. She asked to leave early and returned to her apartment, locking the door behind her. That afternoon, James called, but Amara didn't answer. She sat on her bed, staring at the photo of her mother on the wall, the woman who taught her that her worth came from kindness, not wealth. But now, that very kindness had made her vulnerable to judgment. She texted James, "I need time. Everything is too much. I'm sorry." Then she powered down her phone, tears falling silently. James read her message at the penthouse, feeling like the ground beneath him had given way. He wanted to race to Harlem and knock on her door, but he knew she needed space. Instead, he turned to Rebecca. "Cancel all my meetings this afternoon. I need to figure this out." Rebecca hesitated. "James, the media will write their own if you don't release a statement. And it won't be kind. Then let me write the story. he said firmly. Tomorrow morning, set up a press conference. I'll tell the truth. In Harlem, Amara turned on the TV and saw James's face on the news beneath the headline, Billionaire Whitmore in Mystery Romance. A panelist smirked. From the penthouse to the projects. Is this PR strategy or a real love story? Amara turned off the TV and curled into her pillow. She remembered James's kiss, gentleness, and the look in his eyes when he gazed over his penthouse. The look of someone who belonged to a world she could never truly touch. She feared that his world would crush her no matter how much they loved each other. And worse, she feared that if she stayed, she might drag him down with her. Sunday afternoon in Harlem carried the weekend's warmth. Jazz music floated from a cafe on the corner. Children pedaled bikes along the sidewalks, and the smell of toasted bread wafted from a nearby bakery. But the air was heavy inside Amara Johnson's fourth-floor apartment, like the stillness before a storm. She sat in an old armchair, holding a mug of cold chamomile tea, eyes fixed on the photo of her mother hanging on the wall. Since yesterday, when the picture of her and James Whitmore kissing went viral, her phone hadn't stopped buzzing with messages from reporters and vicious online comments. She had shut it off, but the words, gold digger, charity case, echoed in her mind. The message she sent James, I need time, was her last effort to protect them both. She hadn't expected him to show up at her door. The loud knock startled her. She hesitated, thinking it might be a reporter, but James's voice cut through the thin wood. Amara, it's me. Please open the door. His voice was hoarse like he'd been walking all day to find her. She took a deep breath, stood, and opened the door, and her heart clenched at seeing him. James, usually pristine in cashmere, now looked disheveled. His hair damp with sweat, sleeves rolled up, eyes filled with worry. He stepped in without waiting for an invitation and shut the door behind him. Amara, why didn't you answer? He demanded, his voice a mix of frustration and pain. I've been calling all day. You can't just disappear like this. Amara crossed her arms, trying to keep her distance. I told you I needed time, James. Don't you see how insane this is? The whole world thinks I'm using you. James rubbed his face, stepping closer. I don't care what they think. They don't know us. They don't know what you did for me, who you are. But I care, Amara snapped, her voice shaking. She pointed at the dark phone on the table. They're calling me a gold digger, James. They're digging into my life, where and what I do. Today, a customer at the cafe asked if I sold myself to you. How long do you think I can take this? James froze, his face paling. I didn't know. Amara, I'm sorry. I'll handle the media. I've scheduled a press conference tomorrow morning to tell the truth. The truth. Amara laughed bitterly, walking to the window and staring at the noisy street below. The truth is, we live in two different worlds. You're a billionaire, James. You have a penthouse and a private jet. People like me only see those things on TV. I clean offices to survive, sleep 4 hours a night, and dream of a classroom I may never return to. How could I ever belong in your world? James stepped forward, gripping her shoulders, turning her to face him. You belong with me, Amara. I don't need a penthouse or money if I don't have you. I'd give it all up. She shook her head, tears falling. Don't say that. You don't understand. You can't walk away from that world. Your company, staff, investors, they'll tear you apart for being with me. And I don't want to be the reason you lose everything. James held her shoulders tighter, his eyes burning. You haven't made me lose anything. You've given me everything. Life, meaning. Do you think I was happy before I met you? I was living in a gilded cage, Amara. You opened the door. Amara pushed his hands away and stepped back. But that cage is still your world. I can't walk into it without being judged. And I'm scared. Scared that you'll see me the way they do one day, as someone unworthy. Her words struck James like a punch to the chest. He stood still, his arms dropping to his sides. Do you think I'd see you that way? After everything? After that night in the penthouse when you told me you loved me? Amara turned away, hugging herself. I do love you, James. That's why I have to stop this. I don't want to drag you down, and I'm not strong enough to survive in your world. James stepped forward, voice low, almost pleading. Amara, look at me. She didn't move. Look at me. He gently turned her and lifted her chin. You're stronger than anyone I've ever known. You survived your mother's death, crushing debt, and days with nothing. You taught me that value isn't about wealth. Don't say you're not strong enough. She looked at him, eyes brimming. But I'm tired, James. Tired of proving I belong. I'm tired of being seen as an opportunist. I want to be Amara, not the billionaire's girlfriend. James took a deep breath, fighting back his own emotions. Then let me prove it. Let me stand before the world and say you are everything to me. If they can't accept that, that's their problem, not ours. Amara shook her head, her voice softening. It's not that simple. Don't you see? Even if you defend me, people will always look at me as less. And one day, you'll grow tired of protecting me. James reached for her hand, but she pulled away. Amara, I won't grow tired. I love you, but if you don't believe in me and don't want to fight for this with me, I can't force you. Silence fell between them, broken only by the distant noise of traffic outside. Amara looked at him, her heart breaking. She wanted to run into his arms, but fear held her back. James, she whispered, I think you should go. James froze as if she had slapped him. He wanted to argue, to stay, but her eyes, pained but resolute, stopped him. If that's what you want, he said hoarsely, but I won't give up on us. He walked to the door and paused for one last moment, hoping she'd call him back, but only the door closing followed him, echoing like a farewell. Amara slid to the floor, burying her face in her hands. She remembered his kiss, the safety of his arms, but also the cruel comments, the judging eyes of strangers. She loved James, but feared that love might destroy them both. James stood at the window in the penthouse, watching Manhattan's lights flicker. He held his phone, tempted to call her, but he knew she needed space. Instead, he messaged Rebecca. The press conference is still on, tomorrow, 9 a.m. I'm telling them everything. He didn't know how Amara would respond, but he was ready to prove their love was worth fighting for, even if he had to fight alone. Monday morning, the headquarters of Whitmore Tech in Midtown Manhattan had transformed into a media battleground. Dozens of reporters packed the lobby, cameras flashing, microphones raised, and shouting erupted every time an employee stepped out of the elevator. Outside, the slogan, Whitmore Tech, the future of technology, on the skyscraper's facade was nearly hidden behind a wall of satellite trucks and broadcast vans. James Whitmore stood in a conference room on the 47th floor, gazing down at the crowd through the glass window. His charcoal gray suit fit him perfectly, but his eyes no longer held their signature coldness. Instead, they burned with determination and worry, not for his company or stock price, but for Amara Johnson, the woman he loved. Rebecca, his assistant, stood by the conference table holding an iPad. James, everything's ready, she said, her voice tense. The press room is packed, and CNN will be broadcasting live. But are you sure about this? Kennedy and Blair already called this morning. They want you to deny the relationship, or call it a friendship. If you go public, the stock could drop, and next week's IPO could be in jeopardy. James turned to her, his eyes sharp. I don't care what Kennedy or Blair think. I won't lie about Amara. She's not a friend. She's everything to me. Rebecca nodded, her lips pressed into a line. I understand, but the media's been digging deeper into her background, where she grew up and what she does for a living. They're painting her as an emotional success story, or worse, an opportunist. You need to be ready for those questions. James clenched his fists, trying to contain his anger. He'd read the morning headlines. Billionaire romance or PR ploy. Amara Johnson. From janitor to penthouse. Each one cut deep, not because they hurt him, but because they targeted Amara, the woman who had helped him in the dark hallway of a hospital, the woman who taught him that worth had nothing to do with wealth. Amara stood in her apartment in Harlem, dressed in a gray janitorial uniform, getting ready for her morning shift. She hadn't slept all night, haunted by their previous argument. She loved James, but her fear of judgment and of dragging him down had pushed her to walk away. This morning, she turned on the TV and saw a segment about James's press conference. A reporter said, "Will Whitmore address his romantic scandal or protect his empire?" Amara turned off the TV, her heart pounding. She hadn't planned to go, but her feet moved independently, carrying her toward the subway bound for Midtown. At Whitmore Tech's headquarters, Amara pushed through the crowd of reporters, head bowed to avoid cameras. Dressed in her uniform, hair tied back neatly, she felt out of place among the tailored suits and flashing lenses. A security guard recognized her from tabloid photos and moved to block her, but she said quietly, "I'm Amara. I need to see James." The guard hesitated, then escorted her into the press room's edge, where she stood behind a column, almost invisible. The conference room was ablaze with lights, a forest of microphones clustered on the podium. James stepped out, and the room fell silent. He stood tall, eyes scanning the crowd, but he didn't see Amara. He took a deep breath and began. "Thank you for being here. I know there's been speculation about my personal life, and I want to set the record straight." Reporters immediately raised hands, but James lifted his own to silence them. 2 weeks ago, during the blackout, I was attacked and injured. I ended up at St. Luke's Hospital, bleeding and disoriented. A woman helped me. She bandaged my wound, spoke to me, and treated me like a human being, not a billionaire. That woman was Amara Johnson. Behind the column, Amara's heart stopped. She clenched her fists, tears slipping down her cheeks. James continued, his voice gaining strength. Amara is 29. She works 3 jobs to survive and volunteers at the 8th Street Community Center. She never once asked me for money, power, or attention. All she gave me was kindness, something I didn't know I needed until that night. A reporter shouted, "Is she part of a PR campaign for your IPO?" James locked eyes with him, voice unwavering. "No, this isn't PR. This is love. I love Amara Johnson, completely, unapologetically, and without regret." The room erupted in murmurs and flashing cameras. Amara covered her mouth, stifling a sob. She hadn't expected him to go public like this, to risk everything. Another reporter called out, "Is Amara Johnson a gold digger, as some have claimed?" James slammed his hand on the podium, his voice a growl. "She's the best person I've ever known. Anyone who calls her that understands nothing about human worth." He stepped down from the podium and moved through the crowd like drawn by instinct. Amara stepped out from behind the column, her janitorial uniform starkly contrasting his suit. The room fell into hushed awe as they faced each other. Amara, James said, voice raw. I'm sorry for what you've been through, but I won't give up on us. Amara looked at him, tears falling. James, you're risking everything. Your company, your name. For me? For us, he corrected, taking her hand. You're worth more than anything I have. He embraced her, holding her tight as cameras snapped furiously. Questions flew through the air, but James led her toward the exit, security clearing the path. In the elevator, Amara leaned into him, still trembling. James, I'm still scared. Your world. It'll never fully accept me. James kissed her forehead. Then, let's build a world of our own. But both of them knew, even with love burning strong, the real fight had only just begun. Tuesday, 2 days after James Whitmore's explosive press conference, Manhattan was still buzzing with his love story with Amara Johnson. Tabloids screamed headlines like "Love-Drunk Billionaire" or "IPO Stunt." Social media was split into two camps, one praising a modern fairy tale, and the other mocking Amara as the gold digger of the century. At Whitmore Tech headquarters, James sat in his 52nd floor office, eyes on the computer screen showing stock charts that had dropped 4% since Monday morning. His assistant, Rebecca, walked in holding an iPad, her face tense. Gregory Kennedy just pulled out, she said. Victoria Blair is reconsidering too. They're saying you've put personal emotions above the company's interests. James rubbed his temples, eyes gazing out at the shimmering skyline of Manhattan. What do they want, Rebecca? A CEO without a heart? I made it clear. Amara isn't the problem. If they can't handle it, let them go. But his voice couldn't hide the worry. Whitmore Tech's IPO, scheduled for next week, was the pinnacle of his career, and the stock dip threatened thousands of employees. Still, when he thought of Amara, her warm brown eyes, the gentle way she bandaged his wound, he knew he wouldn't change a thing. In Harlem, Amara stood in the break room of the Midtown Law Office where she worked as a janitor. Her faded gray uniform clung to her as she wiped the sweat from her forehead after 3 hours of scrubbing floors. Her phone buzzed with a text from Tanya, her close colleague. You okay? The press is still going wild. Amara didn't reply, but her heart felt heavy. Since yesterday, her co-workers had given her odd looks. Clients whispered as she passed by. Someone had even left a tabloid on a desk with a photo of her and James. The words "gold digger" scrawled in pen. She wanted to scream that she loved James for who he was, not for his money. But she knew no one would believe her. Suddenly, a reporter appeared at the door, camera ready. Amara Johnson? I'm from the Daily Post. Anything to say about Whitmore? How much did he pay you for this story? Amara froze, gripping her mop handle tightly. Tanya rushed in, stepping in front of her. Get out now, or I'm calling security. The reporter backed off, but still snapped pictures. Amara turned away, heart pounding, feeling like the world was violating her. After her shift, Amara went to the 8th Street Community Center, where she felt safe. But even there, something had shifted. A group of volunteers, led by Marcus, surrounded her as she walked into the kitchen. Hey, superstar, Marcus teased with a big grin. Kissing a billionaire in the park? You've been holding out on us. Amara forced a smile, but there was sadness in her eyes. Marcus noticed and softened his tone. Hey, I'm just messing with you. You okay? Those papers are full of crap. Amara nodded, voice trembling. I don't know, Marcus. I love him, but people think I'm a gold digger. I don't know how to keep going. Marcus placed a hand on her shoulder. You're Amara, the woman who brings bread to old Mr. Joe every Wednesday and teaches the kids how to read. If people can't see that, they're not worth your worry. His words warmed her heart, but the fear still clung to her. She started ladling soup, trying to focus when a young mother named Lena, who regularly came to eat, pulled her aside. "Amara, I saw the news," Lena said quietly. "Don't let them make you feel unworthy. I was once called a leech for being on welfare, but I still raised my kid. You're stronger than they think." Amara hugged Lena, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. The support from the community, people who knew hardship like she did, gave her strength, but also made her wonder, did she have enough courage to stand beside James, to face his world? Meanwhile, James received unexpected good news. A new investor, Margaret Ellis from Pinnacle Ventures, called. "James, I admire your honesty," she said in a warm, steady voice. "Choosing love instead of hiding it? That's authentic leadership. I want to invest $200 million in your IPO." James exhaled, relieved, though his heart still felt heavy. He wanted to share the news with Amara, but she hadn't replied to his message from the day before. That night, Amara returned to her apartment, turned on the TV, and saw a clip of James being interviewed on CNN. He sat before the camera, wearing a sharp gray suit, but his eyes were filled with emotion. "Amara Johnson is not a story for the tabloids," he said. "She's the woman who changed me. I won't let anyone hurt her." Amara switched off the TV and hugged her pillow, her heart pounding. She missed his arms, his voice telling her he loved her, but she also remembered the stares from clients, the headlines. She wanted to call him, but feared losing herself once she entered his world. James, in his penthouse, stared out into the dark Manhattan night. He held his phone, his finger hovering over Amara's number, but didn't press call. He knew she needed time, but each passing hour felt like a century. He opened his laptop and read a positive article online. Whitmore's love story inspires public. Stock prices stabilize. He smiled, but he knew Amara was the only thing that truly mattered. He texted her, "I'll be here when you're ready. I love you." Amara, reading the message, felt a flicker of hope. She didn't respond, but for the first time, she wondered if she could find a way to rise, not to prove anything to the world, but to herself, that she was worthy of this love. On Wednesday, the golden sunset bathed the streets of Harlem, slipping through the windows of the 8th Street Community Center. Inside the kitchen, the scent of lentil soup and toasted bread filled the air, mingling with the laughter of volunteers. Amara Johnson, dressed in a gray t-shirt and jeans, ladled soup into bowls, trying to focus on her work to forget the chaos of the past days. The press conference where James Whitmore publicly declared his love for her still echoed in her mind. The harsh online comments had started to fade, but the fear that she didn't belong in his world still clung to her. She hadn't replied to James's message from the day before, though her heart pounded every time she read "I love you." James stood at the kitchen door, wearing a deep blue sweater and jeans, looking more approachable than usual. He had canceled an investor meeting to come here, determined to see Amara after 3 days of silence. He watched her work, saw how she smiled at a child asking for more bread, and his heart tightened. He knew he had dragged her into a media storm, but also knew he couldn't live without her. Taking a deep breath, he stepped forward. "Amara." She looked up, her hand frozen on the ladle. Her brown eyes widened, then softened. "James," she said softly, "what are you doing here?" "I want to talk," he replied, his gaze sincere. "Not through messages or cameras. Just us." Amara glanced around and noticed Marcus and the other volunteers watching. She nodded and set the ladle down. "Out back. 5 minutes only. I've got work." She led him through the back door to a brick-paved courtyard beneath an old oak tree, the same place they had once shared stories of the past. They sat on plastic chairs, a small but tense space between them. "Amara," James began, voice low. I'm sorry I let things spiral. The press conference. I wanted to protect you, but didn't realize it would hurt you more. Amara crossed her arms, eyes on the ground. It's not your fault, James. You did what you thought was right. But you don't understand what it's like to have the whole world see me as some opportunist. Yesterday, a reporter tried to take my photo at the center. I'm scared to go to work every day. Scared they'll dig into my mom, my past. James clenched his fists, trying to contain his anger at the media. I'll hire security or lawyers. I'll do whatever it takes to make them stop. That's not the solution, Amara snapped, eyes blazing. I don't want your protection or your money. I want to be myself, not James Whitmore's girlfriend. But every time I'm near you, I feel like I'm losing that. Her words hit like a blade. James looked at her, heart aching. Do I want to change you? Amara, I love you because you are yourself, because you helped me in the hospital and taught me to see people, not statistics. I don't want you to lose that. Amara sighed, her eyes misting over. I know you love me. But your world, it's too big, James. Your investors, lavish parties, and the people who think I'm insufficient. I'm afraid I'll embarrass you one day, or you'll grow tired of me. James stood, then knelt before her, taking her hand. Amara, look at me. You're the only person who's made life feel worth living. I don't need parties or investors if they don't accept you. But I was hoping you could believe we can get through this together. She looked at him, tears sliding down her cheeks. I want to believe, James, but I also need to be me, the woman who works here, who dreams of teaching again. If you help me, I'm afraid I'll feel like a charity case. James froze, recalling when she had spoken of her dream to teach. You said you needed a teaching certificate, he said carefully. What if I find you a scholarship, not my money, a public program? Would you accept that? I want to help you reach your dream, not change you. Amara tilted her head, eyes narrowing. A scholarship? Not paid by you? No, James confirmed. I have a contact at a non-profit that supports teachers. I'll make the introduction, but the rest is on you. Deal? She was silent, then nodded slightly. All right. But James, I need us to slow down. I want to love you, but you must know I'm strong enough to stand beside you. James smiled, for the first time that day. As slow as you want, as long as we walk together. He lifted her hand and kissed the back of it. Amara blushed, but didn't pull away. They returned to the kitchen to serve the remaining soup together. James fumbled like a first-timer, spilling a bit on his apron, prompting Marcus to joke, Hey, billionaire, soup's not perfume. Amara laughed, and James saw the light return to her eyes. They worked side by side, shoulders brushing, and both felt a glimmer of hope for the first time in days. When the shift ended, Amara walked James to the door. Thank you for coming, she said gently. And thank you for not pushing me. Thank you for giving me a chance, James replied. His gaze locked with hers. Saturday, can I come back here? She nodded, a small smile on her lips. Saturday, but wear old shoes. This kitchen spares no one. James chuckled and stepped onto the street, feeling lighter. Amara watched him go, her fingers touching the back of the hand he had kissed. She was still afraid, but for the first time, she believed they might find a way, not to change each other, but to build a world together. 6 months after the explosive press conference, early autumn sunlight streamed through the windows of a Harlem Community Elementary School classroom, where Amara Johnson stood at the whiteboard teaching addition to a class of 23rd graders. She wore a white blouse and a navy pencil skirt, her curly hair tied high, and her warm brown eyes sparkled when a student answered correctly. This school, funded by the Whitmore Foundation, was where Amara fulfilled her dream of teaching again after receiving a scholarship to renew her teaching certification. Every day in front of the class, she felt alive. Not a janitor, not the billionaire's girlfriend, just Miss Amara, inspiring children. But today, she was a little anxious. James Whitmore had texted that morning to say he would stop by the 8th Street Community Center, where they still volunteered every Saturday, but hadn't mentioned anything about visiting the school. Their relationship had matured through the storms. Media frenzy, honest conversations, and simple moments like ladling soup or reading books together in her small apartment. Amara still sometimes felt fear. Fear of the spotlight from James's world, fear of not being enough. But he had been patient, always respecting her pace. She loved him, and for the first time, she believed that love could last. At the classroom door, James stood quietly. In a rolled-up shirt and jeans, he looked like an ordinary man, not the CEO of Whitmore Tech. He watched Amara teach, his heart pounding. Over the past 6 months, he had changed. He'd cut back on lavish parties, spent more time at the community center, and used his foundation to fund education for underprivileged children. But the most crucial thing was Amara, the woman who taught him that value lies in kindness, not wealth. Today, he had come up with a decision that would change both of their lives forever. Miss Amara, a student named Jamal, raised his hand excitedly. "Do we have a special guest today?" Amara turned around and saw James, her face flushing. The students cheered, recognizing him from the time he came to read to the class. "James," Amara said, trying to keep her voice steady. "What are you doing here? I'm teaching." James walked in, his grin playful. "I didn't mean to interrupt, Miss Amara, but I have an essential question and need the class's help." He winked at the kids, making them giggle. Amara tilted her head, curious but nervous. James turned to the class, his voice warm. "Kids, Miss Amara is the best teacher, isn't she?" The children nodded and shouted, "Yes!" He continued, "She makes me want to be a better person daily. So I want to ask you all, should I propose to her?" The classroom exploded with cheers and cries of "Yes! And do it!" Amara covered her mouth, her heart pounding. She looked at James as he pulled a small velvet box from his pocket, and the world seemed to slow. He knelt before the teacher's desk and opened the box to reveal a rose gold ring with a brown topaz, sparkling like her eyes, surrounded by tiny diamonds. "Amara Johnson," James said, voice trembling with emotion. "6 months ago, you bandaged my hand in a hospital, but really, you healed my heart. You taught me that love is about seeing the real person, choosing each other daily, no matter what. You are my light. You are my home. I won't promise you the whole world, because you already gave it to me. But I promise to love you, to honor you, and to build a beautiful life with you." Amara stood frozen, tears rolling down her cheeks. The children screamed with excitement, one yelling, "Say yes, miss!" She looked at James and saw the sincerity in his eyes. Not a billionaire, but the man who had stood beside her through everything. But a flicker of fear passed through her. Could she truly belong in his world forever? "James," she whispered, voice trembling. "Are you sure? Your world. It still scares me." James stood, taking her hand. "I'm sure, Amara. It's not my world. It's ours. You don't need to change. I want you to be my wife." His eyes searched hers, full of hope, and the kids held their breath. Amara took a deep breath, feeling her fears dissolve. She nodded, smiling through tears. "Yes, I'll marry you." The class erupted, shouting and clapping. James slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her into a gentle kiss, making the kids giggle, and a few covered their eyes. Miss Amara is getting married, Jamal shouted, running around the room. Amara laughed and hugged James, feeling his warmth. She looked at the ring, not flashy, but perfect, like their love, simple, enduring. After class, James stayed to help Amara clean the room. They chatted about the wedding. She wanted it at the community center, and he immediately agreed. But as they left the school, a reporter lingered near the gate, camera at the ready. Amara froze, but James took her hand. "Let them," he said. "We're not hiding anymore." Amara nodded, squeezing his hand. She still feared the flash of cameras, but with James beside her, she felt strong enough to face it. They stepped out onto the street, bathed in sunset light, and for the first time, Amara truly believed they could build a future, not just for themselves, but for the community that helped them find each other. On a gentle May afternoon, the garden behind the 8th Street Community Center in Harlem bloomed with white daisies and glowed under strings of lanterns hung from the old oak tree. Soft jazz music from a local band floated through the air, blending with laughter and lively conversation. Inside the dressing room of the center, Amara Johnson stood before a mirror, wearing her grandmother's wedding dress, white silk altered with delicate lace trim. She touched the brown topaz ring on her finger, her heart pounding. Today, she would become the wife of James Whitmore, the man who had entered her life on a night of darkness and changed everything. On the other side of the garden, James stood in a simple black suit beside Marcus, a community center volunteer turned reluctant best man. "Nervous, billionaire?" Marcus teased, patting James on the shoulder. "Because your bride is a rare gem." James chuckled, but his eyes stayed fixed on the garden entrance, where Amara would appear. Over the past 6 months, since he proposed to her in that classroom, they had weathered media storms, investor pressure, and personal fears. Whitmore Tech's IPO had succeeded, even after losing a few investors, thanks to support from people like Margaret Ellis, who believed in the power of authenticity. However, for James, the true victory was Amara, the woman who taught him that love is about choosing each other daily. The ceremony began as Amara walked out, holding a bouquet of daisies, led by a group of her 3rd grade students, tossing petals along the path. The crowd, a unique mix of CEOs, volunteers, students, and Harlem locals, rose and cheered. Tanya, Amara's colleague, dabbed her eyes as she passed. Lena, a young mother from the center, smiled brightly, holding her little girl. James looked at Amara, and everything else disappeared. She was beautiful because of the dress and warm brown eyes, the light guiding him through his darkest days. The vows were exchanged beneath the oak, witnessed by the community that nurtured their love. Amara spoke first, her voice clear but emotional. "James, you saw me when I thought I was invisible. You taught me that I deserve love, that I deserve to dream. You are my harbor and my adventure. I promise to love you, challenge you, and build with you a world where everyone is seen." James held her hand, his eyes glistening. "Amara, you healed me, not just with bandages, but with kindness and resilience. You taught me that true wealth is to love and be loved. I promise to stand beside you, protect you, and spend my life making you happy." He paused, smiling. "And I promise not to spill soup in the kitchen again." The crowd burst into laughter, and the children cheered. While exchanging rings, a photographer tried to sneak into the garden for a shot. Marcus quickly escorted him out, whispering, "This is their day, buddy." But Amara and James didn't notice. They kissed beneath the lanterns, a kiss full of sweetness and promise, as the garden erupted in applause. The reception occurred in the center's hall, decorated with flowers and photos from their days serving soup together. CEOs chatted with volunteers about community projects, while Amara's students taught an investor how to jump rope. Mrs. Rodriguez, Amara's former neighbor, read a poem about love that brought tears to many eyes. Amara and James cut their wedding cake, a simple vanilla from a Harlem bakery, and shared their first dance to Etta James's At Last. In the middle of the celebration, they slipped away to the community center kitchen where their love had begun. James pulled Amara into his arms, and they swayed gently to the distant music. "Do you remember the first time we were here?" he asked softly. "When you spilled an entire pot of soup?" Amara teased, resting her head on his chest. "I thought you'd never come back. And I think I fell for you right then," James murmured, kissing her hair. "Amara, do you ever regret it? Choosing me, even when it was so hard?" She looked up, her eyes bright. "No. You made me believe I was enough to be loved, enough to dream. I only regret being afraid for so long." She paused, then smiled. "What about you? Regret walking away from a few investors to marry a Harlem schoolteacher?" James laughed, pulling her closer. "I traded a few $1,000,000 for an entire world. Best deal I've ever made." They kissed again, and the kitchen, still filled with the scent of bread and echoes of jazz, became the perfect place for a forever promise. Amara and James stood in the garden as the party wound down, saying goodbye to their guests. A small student ran up and hugged Amara. "Miss Amara, are you a princess now?" Amara knelt, smiling. "No, but Mr. James and I are building a kingdom, where everyone matters." The child nodded and ran off, and Amara turned to James, heart full of peace. They left Harlem in the same car James once sent for her, now heading for a simple honeymoon in a cabin in Maine. They knew more challenges would come: media scrutiny, pressure, differences. But they had chosen each other, and that was enough. Their love, born on a night of darkness, proved that kindness and authenticity could conquer anything.